Irene, could you tell me about that day? I guess you went from East Noonan to the old mill. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Could you start from that morning in East Noonan, what happened there, and then tell us about going to the old mill?
Well, we went to the East Noonan mill at 7 o'clock. That's when the people went to work at 7. And no, at 6 o'clock. And we walked from there to the old mill, which I think they say is 3 miles. But we were tired and really hungry when we got back to home.
Okay. When you got to, can you tell me how many people were with you, if you were, what you were carrying, and what happened when you got to the old mill?
We wasn't carrying anything, but I don't know. It's been so long. We just went to the gates at the old mill the same way. But the ones that wanted to work went on in and went to work. But the ones that didn't want to work stayed on with the crowd. I don't remember how many there was. There was a good many. And we just stayed outside the gate. We were all organizers had already told us not to go inside the gate. But we asked the ones that didn't belong to the union to not go in, but the ones that wanted to work went on in. They didn't pay us any attention. But that's the way it happened.
Now, you were telling me that the National Guards came that day.
Yes.
Could you tell me about that, what you saw, and what the National Guards did to the strikers?
Well, we were there when the National Guards got there, and they went inside, of course, and asked us if we would go away, but the ones that wanted to work went on in, and we didn't. We all just marched away from there and went back home.
No. I know that on that day, there were some strikers that were from other mills that were with you.
Oh, yeah,
Could you tell me about them and what the National Guards did with the strikers that weren't from East Noonan?
They either had a way to go home, or the guards carried them home, carried them back to where they lived and let them out. But I don't remember how many mills they were from, Sargent and Noonan and East Noonan. I don't know. It seemed like there was some from Hogansville there too.
Now, I'm going to tell you what I know about this, and maybe it'll help you refresh your memory, okay?
Okay.
As I understand it, there were strikers that came from Hogansville and some from LaGrange and Sargent and maybe even Rockmart, and they came down to East Noonan.
Yes.
And they picked you all up, and then you all went down to the old mill, and at the old mill they were met by the National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
The National Guard carted off all the strikers that weren't from East Noonan and brought them to Fort McPherson in Atlanta.
No, they didn't take us to Fort McPherson. I don't remember the National Guard taking us anywhere from East Noonan. We just had to go back home, so we marched back home.
When you marched, did you sing?
Oh yeah, we sang songs as we marched and laughed and told funny things and enjoyed being with the crowd, you know. But I don't know what the ones that didn't live at East Newland did. I really don't know what they did.
Later on, did you hear about those people getting arrested and taken to Fort Mac?
Oh, yes, we heard about that.
Tell us about it.
We heard it on the radio and read about it in the papers. But I don't know how long all that lasted.
When did you get your notice to move?
Beg your pardon?
When did you get your notice to move?
We got our notice to move right away. They wouldn't let us have a house to live in. So we had to move. We moved a little piece from East Newland in the country they called City View. But that's about halfway between Newland and East Newland.
Well, if your daddy wasn't on strike, why did they make you move?
That was the way they had furnished them. They cut their pay all out. They didn't have nothing coming in. Then they formed that WPA, and they would let one in the family work. And I was the one that worked in our family. And one day it rained and turned off cold, and it started snowing before dark. And we walked home in that falling snow. And Mama made me wash my feet in warm, soapy water and put Vicks Save in it, try to keep us from being sick. And I didn't get sick from it. But some of the family did have real bad colds, but I didn't have a bad cold.
So what happened to you and your sister and your family? Could you tell me again when you went back to East Newnan after this strike, or after that day when you left the old mill?
We went back to work, but they didn't let us work. They finally told us that if we'd move off the village, they'd let us girls work, but they didn't let my daddy work. Because we were younger than he was, and they felt like we would be beneficial to him more than the older ones would.
Could you explain to us why the mill evicted you and your family? And use that word eviction or leave the house?
They asked my daddy for us to evacuate from the house. And he went and found a house for us right away, of course, and had to get somebody to move us, and we moved halfway between Newland and East Newland. We lived there 2 or 3 years. And we worked at Sergeant a little while on the 3rd shift. But it was hard to get to working back, and we didn't work there too long because we just didn't have a good way going to work and back.
Now, we have a kind of letter that they sent out to people who they wanted to get out of the house. Judy,
Yes.
Do you have that with you?
Uh-huh.
Could read that to her and then see if you remember your father getting a letter like this.
Okay. This is from the Newnan Cotton Mills, Colored and Novelty Yarns, Newnan, Georgia, and it's dated March 16th, 1935. And it was sent to J.M. Arrington in East Newnan.
Yeah, I knew Mr. Arrington.
Did Mr. Arrington, was he part of the union along with you?
No. His son and one of his daughters was.
Well, they wrote to Mr. Arrington, "Dear Sir, the mill desires to have possession of the premises now occupied by you at 23 Hill Street, and you are hereby notified to vacate same on or before Saturday, March 23rd, 1935. Your failure to comply with this notice will necessitate our resort to legal process. Yours very truly, Noonan Cotton Mills," and it's signed R.H. Freeman. Did your family get one of these eviction notices?
No, I don't remember if we did.
So, how did they tell you that you were going to have to leave your house and your jobs?
I don't remember. Really, I don't remember.
Did all...
Judy,
Yes.
let's move on now
Okay.
to afterwards.
Okay.
The union
We need to
did
pause for just a small.
Family left the mill village. Did the union ever try to help you get your job back, be reinstated?
No, they didn't try to help us get our job back.
What did the union do?
The union didn't do anything.
Did you ever hear from them again?
No, we never did hear from them anymore.
Okay. Well, how would you feel if you were to know that they had really tried to help you get your job back or get you in your house again?
Well, it would have helped us a lot because there was many of them in the family. We could have made a real good living that way. But as it was, we had our living cut off. And we went to Noonan and picked up commodities like they give now sometimes, such as Irish potatoes and roast beef and canned milk and salt pork and beans and peas and stuff like that. Anything to help out.
Who did you get this relief from?
WPA.
Could you tell me that again and say the WPA, we had a resort to getting relief?
We got a card from the WPA telling us about getting the relief and what day they would be there. And that was the day that we went. Papa and some of us girls, because it taken that minute to bring it back to home where we used it, and we fared pretty well on it by having a garden and sweet potato patch and stuff like that. And of course, we kept a cow and had our milk and butter. We had a place to keep a cow then, but we didn't have when we lived in East Noonan.
I found a letter when I was in Washington
Yeah.
that described the way the union tried to help get the jobs back and to help protect the strikers who had been evicted. Did you ever hear anything about a case that they tried to bring against the mills to try and help all of you get your jobs back?
No, I never did hear.
Well, I'm going to show you this letter, and in fact, it was through this letter that we found you, and I wanted to talk with you.
Yes.
Well, it says here, and this is written by a man named Frankie Coffey, who was the director of the Atlanta Regional Labor Board, and he was representing your local. And he says here it's dated October 2nd, 1934, which is just about a week after the strike was called off. And it says, and this is written actually to Mr. Coffey. I'm sorry, this is written to Mr. Coffey of the Atlanta Regional Board, and it's signed S.A. Holohan, who is the director of the textile strike here in the area. S.A. Holohan. Does that name ring a bell, Mr. Holohan?
No.
Well, Mr. Holohan wrote to Mr. Coffey, and he said, "I wish to make a complaint of union discrimination in violation of Section 7A of the National Industrial Recovery Act against the Noonan Cotton Mill No. 2 in Noonan, Georgia. This company has refused to reinstate a large number of strikers and members of the union that were in the employ of that concern at the time of the strike. Many workers, not members of the union, with less seniority than those refused employment have been employed. And he says, your prompt investigation of this complaint will be greatly appreciated. And why don't you take a look at this? And you'll see.
Oh, I'm too hot.
You'll see that your name and I believe your sister's name is listed there.
Mm.
Do you want to read them out loud?
Sidney Boswell, I know him now. And he lives in Hogansville. Zona Chandler, she's dead. Mattie Jones married Taylor the last time, and he's dead and she's dead. And Irene Brooks, and I married Homer Elder, and he's dead. Ruth Arrington, and that was Mattie Taylor's sister. And she worked the spinning room, and Margaret Bishop lived across the street from them on Hill Street. And Mattie Brooks was my sister. She worked in the spinning room. She's dead now. And Luella Bishop worked in the spinning room. Verna Brooks worked in the spinning room. And Alma Spradlin worked in the spinning room. We knew them when they lived in the country. And Gladys Spradlin worked in the spinning room. And Alma Brooks worked in the spinning room. Ruby Spradlin worked in the spinning room. And Oscar Morris, it said Twister Room, and I don't really remember him. And Claude Crowley, Twister Room, but I don't remember him. And C.H. Phillips, Winder Room, but I don't remember him. They worked there before I did and after I did.
Well, that sounds like you girls in the spinning room had a kind of group that was all organized together.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, they organized all of us girls at the same time, but I don't remember how we all got together when we went on the march. I really don't.
Let me ask you something. A lot of people were frightened to join the union, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. People were frightened to join it. They afraid they'd lose their job, which we did, of course, and they didn't. But I don't remember. It's just been so long.
What gave you and the other girls in the spinning room the courage to join the union and come out together?
Well, the organizers made it sound so good and everything, so that's the reason we joined it.
Let's do that again.
Okay.
The truck pulls off.
Okay.
But it's just
Ooh,
like
too
what
hot.
The organizers
Too
said
hot.
You had the nerve to do it.
Yes, we
What
had.
gave you the nerve to do it? Just to explain to us why you had the guts to do it when other people didn't. What was there about you?
It was just our nerve, I guess. So pay attention to the organizers and join it. And it got us all in at the same time. Oh, I'm too hot.
Finally, Judy,
Yes.
ask the question we're talking about.
Okay. Tell me, I have a lot of respect for all of you that had that kind of nerve and guts to come out like that. And I want to know what gave you, what made it so that all of you could do that? What gave you the guts to do that and the nerve? Try and explain that to me.
Well, the organizers made it sound so good and everything till it gave us the nerve to try because we needed more money that time. We didn't have any furniture in our house except just the beds and table and chairs, and we had a long bench on each side of the table to have sitting room at the table. Mommy at the head of the table and Papa at the head of the table.
Boy, that must have been a sight with all those girls lined up.
Yes.
We had a dozen of them. You don't have any pictures of that, do you?
I have somewhere. I don't know how where I'd find it.
Yeah, we'd love to see that picture.
We would. We would.
Julie, the
Yes.
ultimate question about her attitude toward the union.
Tell me something. After all these years, I have two questions. One is, how do you feel about the union now after all these years?
Well, it's a good thing when it's carried out right.
I'm going to ask you that again, and I want you to use the word union so we know what you're talking about, okay?
The union is a good thing when it's carried out right, but the way it was then, they didn't have the right leaders, and they didn't know how to carry it out, just by instinct and talk. Oh, I'm so hot.
Do you think the government had your bosses had anything to do with the way the union left you?
No, I don't think the bosses had anything to do with it and about it either. In fact, they was just as much against it as everybody else was that was against it. Turn on the air conditioner, please.
Okay. Before we were talking about this, about so many people were frightened. Yeah, people were frightened to join the union for fear of losing their jobs. And I'm wondering what gave you the courage to join?
Well, they made it sound so good. The organizers made it sound so good. We had the nerve to join because it would have been, if it's been carried out right, we would have had more money and better living conditions. But they didn't know how to carry it out. That's the reason it didn't work out.
How did your father feel about you joining the union?
My father, the organizers didn't talk him into joining, and therefore he didn't join. But all of us girls did that was working at that time. But my father didn't object to it. He thought we knew what we were doing, but we didn't, really.
I have here one of those letters where the union was trying to help you get your jobs back. I'm wondering if you could, read just a portion of it, and you'll see your name listed here. And I want to know what you think about that. Why don't you just read this part over here?
On November the 13th, 1934, Mr. R.H. Freeman, president of the mill, stated that the list of 29 complaints, 20 would not be retired because of lawlessness when the flying squadron interfered with the operation of the mill. Those 20 were stated to be Sidney Boswell, Oscar Morris, Ruth Arrington, Irene Brooks, Alma Brooks, Luella Bishop, Alma Spradlin, Ruby Spradlin, C.H. Phillips, Arthur Duncan, I know him, Zona Chandler, Hash Arrington, Mattie Jones, Mattie Brooks, Verna Brooks, Margaret Bishop, Gladys Spradlin, Claudia Crowley, Hoyt Roberts, Lenny Adams, I don't know them. The above employed 9 occupants housed in the village of their removal will also take Dusty Morris, Lloyd Morris, Mattie Morris, and Myra Otwell are the remaining complement Lloyd Morris was fired for.
What do you think about the union having tried to take up a case and try and help you get your job back?
I don't remember them trying to help us get our job back. I really don't.
Have you ever been back to East Noonan?
Not to live. I've been back on visits, of course, but I hadn't been back to live.
Well, if you had known then that the union was trying to help you get your job back, what would you have done?
Well, we would have probably went back to work if we could have, because it would have been beneficial to us. So I went back to work, but they never did try to help us get our job back.
Well, when you went to the next mill to work, was there an attempt to get a union there?
I don't know if it was an attempt to get a union here in Grantville or not. I really don't. We didn't even know about Grantville then.
Did you ever try and join another union ever since then?
No, I never have tried to join another union because we got bit so bad that time. Only thing I joined is the Methodist Church and the Senior Citizens Club they have here in Grantville. I go to it Mondays and Tuesdays. Enjoy being with other people. They pick me up here at my home and bring me back here to my home. And we have lunch up there.
We've met a number of people, all of whom were working at the time, who recall this strike. Some of them were involved in it, and they're afraid to talk about it.
Well, they was afraid to talk about it because they was afraid they'd lose their job if they did talk about it.
We're meeting people today, years later, who are still afraid to talk about it.
Well, I'm not afraid of it. Many things I'm not afraid of. So really, I'm not afraid of it.
Could you go back and say, I'm not afraid to talk about it?
I'm not afraid to talk about it. But some people are.
Why aren't you afraid to talk about it and some other people are?
I guess I've got more nerve than people. Some people have. I have to have a lot of nerve to be doing what I'm doing now.
A lot of people were blacklisted in other mills when they went to go get a job after this.
Yeah, they called it blackball.
Could you talk about being blackballed?
Well, they just wouldn't give them no job back.
Could you go back and talk about, use the word blackballed, and then they wouldn't give them the job back?
They were blackballed because they belonged to the union, and when they found out they did belong to the union, they wouldn't let them go back. They wouldn't take them back to work.
We know, we know people who, when they would go from one mill to another, they couldn't get a job.
No.
Could you talk about that?
Whenever they went to another mill to try to get a job, if they would known that they had belonged to the union, they wouldn't give them no job. So they'd just be out of luck. I know one time my daddy got a job for us at Porterdale. And we went there and went to work because we had to board there and work. And it was so difficult for us to get away to go from where we lived to Porterdale, so we all quit.
Did you ever go to another mill and they asked you about your participation in the union?
No, at Porterdale they didn't ask us anything about the union. But that was a big plant. It was a mile long down one side of the mill. And that's a pretty good length. But we worked in the spinning room there just like we did at Noonan and East Noonan.